Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Look, if someone had told Lieutenant Hallie that her military career would one day involve babysitting apex predators who barely came up to her knee, she would have laughed them out of the briefing room. And yet, here she was, standing in the doorway of Sentinel Watch's interspecies daycare, trying to remember if she'd rather be getting shot at in the Andromeda campaign or dealing with whatever chaos awaited her inside. Spoiler alert, some days it was a toss-up. Hallie was what the other species on the station liked to call typically human, which was their polite way of saying she confused the hell out of them. She was a decorated veteran, 3 planetary conflicts under her belt, with a service record that made hardened warriors nod in respect. She'd charged machine gun nests, held positions against impossible odds, and once talked down a hostile AI using nothing but spite and a broken comm unit. She was tough, efficient, and had a reputation for being absolutely no-nonsense. She was also, apparently, really good with kids. Go figure. The station's daycare coordinator, Hollis, had discovered this fact entirely by accident 6 months ago when a visiting dignitary's spawn had latched onto Hallie's leg during a tour and refused to let go. Instead of the expected human reaction, which most species assumed would involve panic or aggression, Hallie had simply continued the tour with a 30-pound mollusk attached to her shin, occasionally reaching down to pat its head analog whenever it made worried noises. Now, whenever the daycare was short-staffed, Hallie got volunteered. By volunteered, she meant ordered by Admiral Foster, who thought it was hilarious. She was going to put sand in his coffee. Again. Hallie stepped into the daycare, and immediately every small head turned toward her. The room was a riot of color and noise, designed to accommodate over 20 different species' offspring. There were climbing structures that defied gravity, pools of various liquids for aquatic children, temperature-controlled zones, and enough padding to survive a small explosion, which had happened twice. "Lieutenant!" Hollis appeared from behind a tower of soft blocks, their dark hair escaping from what had probably started the morning as a neat bun. Hollis was one of those perpetually cheerful humans who seemed genuinely delighted by chaos. "You're a lifesaver. Brill called in sick, and we've got the felrathi cubs today." Hallie's eyebrow went up. "The felrathi cubs?" "Yep." Hollis grinned in a way that suggested they were enjoying this far too much. 4 of them. They're spirited. Spirited. Very spirited. Hollis! They've only destroyed 3 toys today, which is actually a personal record for restraint. Hallie sighed and started unlacing her uniform jacket. "Where are they?" Hollis pointed to the far corner, where 4 small shapes were engaged in what appeared to be either an elaborate game or a military planning session. It was hard to tell with felrathi. Now here's what you need to understand about the felrathi. They were apex predators on their homeworld. Pack hunters. Every single cub in that corner could take down prey twice their size using nothing but instinct and those wickedly sharp retractable claws. They had night vision that put human tech to shame, reflexes that bordered on precognition, and a pack mentality that made them devastatingly effective team players. They were also, currently, about 3 to 5 years old in human equivalent years, which meant they had all those terrifying predator instincts combined with absolutely zero impulse control and a burning curiosity about everything. Hallie approached the cubs slowly. Not because she was afraid. Please, she'd faced down worse things before breakfast. But because sudden movements around young predators were just asking for chaos. The felrathi noticed her immediately, their large eyes tracking her approach with an intensity that would have been unnerving if they weren't so damn cute. Sif, the ringleader, was impossible to miss. His fur was a distinctive rust color, and he carried himself with the swagger of someone who absolutely knew he was the one calling the shots. He was watching Hallie with open curiosity, his tail swishing back and forth in that way that meant he was calculating something. Boda, striped like an ancient earth tiger, pressed closer to Sif, nervous energy radiating from every movement. His ears kept swiveling, tracking every sound in the room. Wim, the smallest of the group, was already giggling, a high-pitched chirping sound that the felrathi made when delighted. He seemed to find everything hilarious, including his own feet. And Os, the observer, sat slightly apart from the others, watching Hallie with those two intelligent eyes. If the others were chaos in motion, Os was the one taking notes for later. "Hey there, troublemakers," Hallie said, crouching down to their level. "I'm Hallie. I'm going to be helping out today." 4 pairs of eyes locked onto her face. Then, in perfect synchronization, all 4 heads tilted to the side. Okay, that was adorable and slightly creepy. "Human," Sif said carefully, testing out the word. The felrathi spoke in a series of chirps, growls, and clicks, but the universal translators embedded in the station's infrastructure did a decent job of converting it to something understandable. "You smell like—" He sniffed the air, his small nose twitching. "Metal. And fire?" "Weapons," Os added helpfully. "She smells like weapons." "I'm a soldier," Hallie confirmed. "But today, I'm just here to make sure you all have fun and don't accidentally eat anything you're not supposed to." Wim burst into giggles again. "We don't eat the others. That's the rule." "Good rule," Hallie said seriously. "Let's keep following that one." She stood up, and that's when they saw her boots. Oh, those boots! Hallie's combat boots were a work of art, if your definition of art included beaten to hell and back. They were standard military issue, or at least they had been about a decade ago. Now they were scarred, scuffed, with actual burn marks on one heel and a patch job on the left toe that she'd done herself using salvaged material from a crashed shuttle. The laces were mismatched. One set was original. The other she'd taken from a dead soldier's gear because hers had been destroyed by acid. They were ugly, broken in, and absolutely perfect. She'd told people they had sentimental value. The truth was simpler. They fit right. They'd never given her blisters, and after years of wearing them, the idea of breaking in new boots made her want to fake her own death and retire to a beach planet. The felrathi cubs noticed the boots immediately. All 4 of them froze, their pupils dilating to massive black pools. Their ears went forward. Their tails stopped mid-swish. It was the look of predators spotting prey. "Oh no," Hollis muttered from across the room. "What's oh no?" Hallie asked, not taking her eyes off the cubs. "They've got that look." "What look?" "The I'm going to steal that look." Hallie glanced down at the cubs, who were now slowly circling her feet, moving in that careful, deliberate way that hunters used when stalking. "They're not going to steal my boots." "You sure about that?" "They're children. They're felrathi children." "Same thing." Hollis opened their mouth to argue, but that's when the gastropod incident happened. From somewhere above them came a distressed whistling sound. Hallie looked up to see a small, gelatinous creature stuck to the ceiling, its eye stalks waving frantically. "How did—" Hallie started. "Don't ask," Hollis said tiredly. "Just, can you help me get it down? I'll grab the stepladder." Hallie moved to help, which meant taking her eyes off the felrathi cubs for exactly 90 seconds. That was her first mistake. Getting a gastropod off a ceiling was harder than it looked. The species secreted an adhesive slime when stressed, which meant the more you tried to unstick them, the more stuck they became. It required patience, soothing sounds, and a specialized solvent that Hollis kept in what they called the weird emergency kit. By the time they'd successfully retrieved the little one and returned it to its humidity tank, Hallie had completely forgotten about the cubs. That was her second mistake. She turned back to check on them and found them sitting in a perfect circle in the middle of the play area. Their tails were curled neatly around their feet. Their paws were folded. They looked like the picture of innocence, 4 little angels who would never dream of causing trouble. Hallie's boots were gone. "You've got to be kidding me," she said flatly. The cubs blinked at her in unison. Sif's whiskers twitched. Hallie looked around the immediate area. No boots. She checked under the nearby play structure. No boots. She scanned the room systematically, using the same tactical assessment she'd use for a hostile environment. Nothing. Not a single boot. She looked back at the cubs. They hadn't moved. They were still sitting there, picture perfect. But now their tails were swishing ever so slightly. And if Hallie wasn't mistaken, which she wasn't, because she'd been reading alien body language for years, they looked pleased with themselves. "All right," Hallie said slowly. "Which one of you little hunters wants to tell me where my boots went?" 4 innocent faces stared back at her. "No boots," Sif said, his voice the epitome of sincerity. "We sit. Good cubs." "Very good cubs," Boda added nervously. Wim giggled. That was probably a confession right there, but Hallie had no proof. Os just watched her with those calculating eyes, and Hallie got the distinct impression she was being studied. Hollis walked over, took one look at Hallie's sock-covered feet, and started laughing. "I warned you." "They're children," Hallie repeated, but with less conviction this time. "They're felrathi children," Hollis repeated back. "Predator species, hoarding instinct, love stealing shiny things, and apparently," they gestured at Hallie's feet, "things that smell interesting." "My boots smell interesting. To them? Probably smell like adventure and violence. That's like catnip for felrathi." Hallie pinched the bridge of her nose. She'd negotiated with hostile alien warlords. She'd defused actual bombs. She'd survived being buried under rubble for 16 hours. 4 tiny predators had just outsmarted her. "Okay," she said, settling into strategy mode. "Okay, here's what we're going to do." "Search the room?" Hollis suggested. "No." "Demand they give them back?" "No." "Call their parents and report a theft?" "Absolutely not." Hallie looked at the cubs, who were watching her with intense interest. A slow smile crossed her face. "I'm going to make them want to give the boots back." Hollis raised an eyebrow. "How?" "You ever hear the human expression, guilt trip?" "Oh, no." "Oh, yes." "Hallie, they're cubs." "Cubs with a conscience," Hallie said. "Watch and learn." She walked over to the reading corner, a cushioned area designed for quiet time, and sat down heavily. She made sure to do it with extra drama, letting out a long, weary sigh that echoed through the room. The cub's ears perked up. Hallie stared at her sock-covered feet and shook her head slowly. "Well," she said to no one in particular, "I guess they're just boots. Just old boots. Nothing special about them." From the corner of her eye, she saw Sif's tail stop swishing. Boda's ears went back slightly. "I mean," Hallie continued, her voice taking on a softer, almost wistful tone, "sure, they walked me through my first mission off-world. And yeah, They were there when I had to cross the radioactive wastes of Helion-3. And okay, maybe they're the boots I was wearing when my mentor pulled me out of that crashed transport before it exploded. None of that was true. She'd bought these boots at a military surplus store for 30 credits because they were on sale and had good arch support. But she was selling it. Oh, she was selling it hard. And I suppose it doesn't matter that those boots have been with me through everything. Every battle, every victory, every time I thought I wasn't going to make it home. She picked at her socks sadly. They're just boots. Just pieces of leather and rubber. What's the sentimental value of that? Wim's giggles had stopped. His ears were drooping. Boda was actively whimpering. Even Oss looked uncomfortable. Sif, the ringleader, was staring at Hallie with something that might have been horror. His tail had wrapped around his own body, a self-comforting gesture. "I'm sure whoever has them," Hallie said, letting her voice crack just slightly, "is taking good care of them. Probably in a nice safe place, not scattered in pieces or anything. Because that would be—" She sniffed. "That would be really sad." Hollis was standing behind the cubs, hands clamped over their mouth, shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. They gave Hallie a thumbs up. The cubs looked at each other. No words were exchanged, but something passed between them. That silent pack communication that the Felrathi were famous for. Ears twitched, tails swayed. Tiny chirps too quiet for the translators to pick up. Then Wim, the smallest, and clearly the one with the weakest constitution for guilt, let out a small, distressed sound and scampered off behind the play structure. Hallie waited, maintaining her sad, wistful expression. 30 seconds later, Wim reappeared, dragging something behind him. One boot. He pulled it across the floor with great effort, his little claws clicking on the tile. When he reached Hallie, he pushed the boot toward her, then immediately hid behind Boda, peeking out with worried eyes. Hallie picked up the boot like it was made of gold. She examined it from every angle, running her fingers over the familiar scuffs and marks. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, Wim, you found it. You found my boot." Wim peeked out a little further, his ears cautiously rising. "You're such a good hunter," Hallie continued, putting genuine warmth in her voice. "Such a clever, brave little one. Thank you for bringing this back to me." Wim's tail started to swish again, this time with pride. Hallie made a show of putting the boot on, lacing it up carefully. Then she looked at her other foot, still sock-covered, and made a puzzled face. You know, I feel like I'm forgetting something. It's like there's supposed to be something else. Another boot? Does that sound right?" The cubs looked at each other again. Hallie waited, patient as a hunter herself. Boda whimpered. Oss clicked his claws together nervously. Sif's fur was slightly puffed, a sign of agitation. And then all four of them turned and scampered off toward the ventilation grate in the corner of the room. Hollis walked over and sat down next to Hallie. "That," they said admiringly, "was brutal." "I learned from the best," Hallie replied. "My grandmother could guilt-trip a stone into apologizing." "What if they don't bring the other boot back?" "They will." Hallie was completely confident. "They're predators, but they're also pack animals. Pack animals understand fairness, reciprocity. I showed them kindness when Wim returned the first boot. Now they know that bringing things back results in praise, not punishment. They'll bring it back. And if you're wrong, then I hop around the station on one boot and become a cautionary tale." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the other children play. A small crystalline being was stacking blocks using some kind of telekinesis. Two furry creatures were engaged in what looked like either a wrestling match or a hug. The gastropod they'd rescued was happily munching on some kind of kelp. "You know," Hollis said thoughtfully, "most species still can't figure humans out. We're supposed to be these dangerous death-worlders. But then you do stuff like this." "Like what?" "Use emotional manipulation on children to get your boots back." "Hey, it's a learning experience for them. Actions have consequences. Guilt is a powerful motivator, and returning stolen goods is the right thing to do. You're teaching them morality through psychological warfare." "It's called parenting, Hollis." Before Hollis could respond, the cubs emerged from the ventilation area. They were moving in single file, a solemn procession, and each one was carrying a piece of Hallie's boot. Her second boot, to be specific. Her disassembled second boot. Os came first, walking with the careful dignity of someone performing a sacred ritual. He carried the sole of the boot in his mouth, his eyes serious and apologetic. He placed it at Hallie's feet with exaggerated care, then sat back on his haunches. "Thank you, Os," Hallie said gravely, accepting the piece like it was a royal gift. "Very thoughtful of you." Os's ears perked up slightly, relief evident in his posture. Next came Boda, and the poor thing looked absolutely miserable. The laces were wound around his neck, like some kind of makeshift scarf, and he was trembling as he approached. He couldn't even make eye contact, just shuffled forward and sat there, waiting for Hallie to unwrap them. She did so gently, her fingers careful not to snag his fur. "Hey, it's okay," she murmured. "You're doing the right thing." "That takes courage, Boda." His tail gave one small, grateful swish. Then Sif approached, and oh, he was trying so hard to maintain his dignity. His head was high, his stride purposeful. He carried the tongue of the boot, that interior flap, and he placed it down with the air of a general surrendering his sword. There was wounded pride in every movement, but also something else. Acceptance, maybe. Understanding. "Thank you, Sif," Hallie said, meeting his eyes directly. "Leaders know when to make hard choices. This was a hard choice, and you made it anyway." Something shifted in Sif's expression. He sat down next to the others, forming a line. For the next 3 minutes, the cubs made multiple trips. The eyelets came back in Wim's mouth, clinking like tiny bells. The heel padding arrived via group effort, all 4 of them dragging it together. The insole, the counter, the vamp. Piece by piece, Hallie's boot was returned to her. She laid everything out carefully, examining each component. "Well," she said, "looks like I've got a puzzle to solve. Anyone want to help me put it back together?" 4 heads nodded eagerly, guilt transforming into enthusiasm for this new project. But then Wim made one more trip to the ventilation grate, and when he came back, he was dragging something that definitely wasn't part of any boot. It was a small, sealed container about the size of Hallie's fist, made of reinforced transparent polymer. And right there, printed clearly on the side in Universal Standard Script, was a symbol that made every military-trained person's blood run cold. Biohazard. The playful atmosphere evaporated like water on a hot plate. Hallie's entire demeanor shifted in a heartbeat. The gentle daycare helper vanished, replaced by the combat veteran who'd survived 3 wars. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm, but carried an edge of absolute authority. "Wim, buddy, I need you to put that down very, very carefully. Right here in front of me." Wim, picking up on the sudden tension, did exactly as he was told. The container made a small click as it settled on the floor. Hollis had gone pale. "Is that—" "Yes." Hallie didn't take her eyes off the container. "Hollis, I need you to quietly move all the other children to the far side of the room. Keep them calm. Don't make it seem like an emergency." To their credit, Hollis moved immediately, their voice bright and cheerful as they called out, "Hey everyone! Who wants to see the new zero-gravity bubbles in the water play area?" There was a chorus of excited sounds as small beings of various species scrambled toward the other end of the daycare. Hallie crouched down, bringing herself eye level with the 4 felrathi cubs. They were picking up on her tension, their ears flat, tails low. "Nobody's in trouble," she said softly. "But I need to know something very important. Wim, where exactly did you find this?" Wim pointed toward the ventilation grate with one small paw. "In the walls, in our special place." "Your special place?" Sif spoke up, his voice smaller than before. "We found a hiding spot, behind the grate. It's warm and dark and perfect for keeping treasures." "Treasures," Hallie repeated. "Have you found other things back there? Things that look like this?" The 4 cubs exchanged glances. That silent pack communication again. Os was the one who answered. "Shiny things, metal things. Some make beeping sounds." Oh, that was not good. That was actually very not good. Hallie stood slowly and tapped the communication badge on her collar. "Lieutenant Hallie to station security. I need Commander Sable to the interspecies daycare immediately. We have a situation." The response was immediate. Security responding. Nature of situation? Recovered biohazard container. Unknown origin. Possible additional items. There was a brief pause. Then, lockdown protocols initiated. Commander Sable en route. ETA 2 minutes. The daycare's doors sealed with a soft hiss. Emergency lighting kicked in. A gentle blue that wouldn't frighten the children, but clearly indicated something serious was happening. Hollis, still maintaining that cheerful voice, was now reading a story to the gathered children. But their eyes kept darting toward Hallie, concern written all over their face. The felrathi cubs huddled together, uncertain and scared. Hallie sat down with them, keeping her body language open and non-threatening. "Hey, listen to me. You 4 are not in trouble. I need you to understand that. You didn't do anything wrong." "But the container," Boda started, his voice shaking. "You didn't know what it was. How could you? You were just collecting interesting things like any good hunters would." She looked at each of them in turn. "Actually, you might have just done something really important. Something that's going to help the whole station." Sif's ears perked up slightly. "Help?" "Help," Hallie confirmed. "That container went missing from one of our labs weeks ago. We've been looking for it. You found it. That makes you—" The door hissed open. Commander Sable strode in, flanked by 2 security officers in full hazard gear. Sable herself was all business, her dark eyes scanning the room with tactical precision. She was compact, efficient, and had the kind of presence that made even tall people feel like she was looking down at them. "Lieutenant," she said crisply. Then her gaze fell to the container. "Is that medical lab container?" "Yes, ma'am." "Biohazard marked. Retrieved by—" Hallie gestured to the cubs. "Our junior reconnaissance team here." Sable's eyebrow went up at that description, but she rolled with it. One of the security officers moved forward with a scanning device, waving it over the container. After a moment, he looked up. "It's sealed, Commander. No breach. Reading indicates genetic research material. Non-infectious, non-toxic." Some of the tension left Sable's shoulders. "That's the missing sample from the Botanical Genetics Lab. Disappeared 3 weeks ago during a containment pressure event." She looked at the cubs. "Where did you find this?" 4 small paws pointed to the ventilation grate. "And you said there were other items?" Sable directed the question at Hallie. "That's what they've indicated." Shiny things, metal things, some with beeping sounds. Sable's expression went from relieved to concerned again. Beeping sounds. Wonderful. She turned to her officers. Get a team down. Here. We need to access that ventilation system and recover whatever else is back there. Within minutes, the daycare had been transformed into a staging area. The children had been moved to an adjacent room with additional caretakers. Hollis was helping coordinate, though they kept shooting worried glances at the felrathi cubs, who were staying close to Hallie. The security team removed the ventilation grate and peered inside with lights and scanners. "We've got a space back here," one officer called out. "Looks like the ductwork expands into a junction point. I can see multiple objects, requesting permission to enter and retrieve." "Denied," Sable said immediately. "That space is too small for an adult in full gear. We need to send in a drone." "Commander," Hallie said carefully. "Or you could ask the individuals who've been in and out of there multiple times and know exactly where everything is." Sable looked at the cubs, then at Hallie. "You want me to send children into a potentially hazardous area? I want you to let experienced scouts show us what they found, under supervision, with proper safety protocols. They're cubs. They're felrathi cubs. Apex predators with better night vision, spatial awareness, and climbing ability than any drone we've got on this station." Hallie crossed her arms. "And they want to help. Look at them." It was true. The 4 cubs were practically vibrating with eagerness now that they understood they weren't in trouble. Sif was standing at attention like a soldier awaiting orders. Sable was quiet for a long moment, clearly running through protocols in her head. Finally, she sighed. "I'm going to regret this. All right, here's what's going to happen. The cubs can go in, but they only retrieve items I specifically clear via scanner. They bring things to the entrance, we assess, and they go back for more. At the first sign of anything actually dangerous, we pull them out and do this the slow way. Agreed?" "Agreed," Hallie said. "Do they understand the plan?" Hallie turned to the cubs and explained it in simple terms. Their eyes were huge, their tails swishing with excitement. This had gone from "we're in trouble" to "we're helping with an important mission" in record time. "We can do it," Sif said firmly. "We're good hunters." "The best," Hallie agreed. "Okay, team, let's see what you've got." What followed was possibly the most unusual recovery operation in Sentinel Watch's history. The cubs would disappear into the ventilation system, and moments later, items would appear at the great entrance. The security team would scan each object, log it, and give clearance for the next retrieval. First came the data chips, 3 of them, each marked with classification codes. "Those went missing 2 months ago," Sable muttered, scanning them. "From the engineering department. We thought they'd been destroyed." Then came tools, a molecular spanner, a calibration device, a small welding torch that was, thankfully, unpowered. "How did all this end up in the ventilation?" one of the security officers asked. Another officer was checking a data pad. "According to maintenance logs, there was a pressure event in Medical Lab 6 about a month ago. Emergency venting protocols activated. Looks like these small items got sucked into the air circulation system and distributed throughout the ductwork." "And our little friends here found them," Sable said, watching as Oz carefully pushed a small electronic component toward the grate. "They've been hoarding station equipment like dragons collecting gold." Wim appeared next, dragging what looked like somebody's lunch container. It was empty, but clearly had been shiny and interesting enough to steal. "That's mine," one of the security officers exclaimed. "I lost that 2 weeks ago." The cubs continued their retrieval mission with impressive efficiency. They'd clearly organized their hoard, because items came out in groups. All the shiny things together. all the beeping things together, all the soft things together. That last category included someone's scarf, a small stuffed toy, and what appeared to be a very expensive silk handkerchief. "Admiral Foster is going to kill me," Sable muttered, scanning the handkerchief. "This is his. He claimed someone from diplomatic services stole it." Hallie bit back a laugh. The operation took about an hour. By the end, they'd recovered over 30 items, including the critical medical sample, classified data chips, numerous tools, and personal effects from half the station's crew. The Cubs emerged from their final trip looking exhausted but proud. Their fur was dusty, and Boda had a cobweb on one ear, but they sat in formation like soldiers reporting for duty. Sable surveyed the recovered items, then looked at the Cubs with something that might have been respect. "Well," she said, "I suppose I should thank you. You've solved several mysteries today." "Are we in trouble?" Wim asked nervously. "No," Sable said, and her stern expression softened just slightly. "You're not in trouble. You didn't know these things were important. You were just being—" She searched for the right word. "Curious." "Curious is good," Oss said. "Our hunt mother says curiosity makes better hunters." "Your hunt mother is right." Sable crouched down, bringing herself to their level. "But from now on, if you find something interesting, maybe tell an adult before you hide it away. Deal?" Four heads nodded solemnly. "Good." Sable stood and tapped her comm. "Security, this is Commander Sable. Lockdown lifted. Situation resolved. All recovered items to be logged and returned to appropriate departments." The daycare doors unsealed. The gentle blue emergency lighting faded back to normal. From the adjacent room came the sounds of children playing, unaware that anything unusual had happened. Hollis poked their head in. "Everyone okay?" "Everyone's fine," Hallie confirmed. "Crisis averted. And we have 4 new junior security consultants." The Cubs' chests puffed with pride at that title. Sable was coordinating her team's exit when her comm chirped. She listened for a moment, and her eyebrows rose. "Understood. I'll inform them." She looked at Hallie and the Cubs. "Admiral Foster wants to see everyone involved in the recovery operation, including the Cubs." Boda whimpered. "The Admiral? The big boss?" "The big boss," Sable confirmed. "Don't worry. He's not scary." Hallie and Sable exchanged a glance. Admiral Foster was absolutely terrifying when he wanted to be. "Well," Hallie said, looking at her pile of boot components still scattered on the floor, "I guess the boot repair is going to have to wait." The walk to Admiral Foster's office was an interesting experience. Hallie led the way, still in her socks and one boot, the other foot making soft padding sounds on the metal deck. Behind her came 4 felrathi Cubs doing their absolute best to walk in formation like proper soldiers, though Wim kept getting distracted by literally everything they passed. Behind them, trying not to laugh, came Hollis and Commander Sable. They passed crew members in the corridors, and every single one did a double take at the sight of a decorated lieutenant leading a squad of dusty, nervous predator children toward command level. One ensign actually walked into a wall because she was staring instead of watching where she was going. "Eyes forward, Ensign," Sable called out without looking back. "Yes, Commander." "Sorry, Commander." When they reached the Admiral's office, the door slid open to reveal a space that was somehow both austere and comfortable. Admiral Foster sat behind his desk, a tall man with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen too many battles to be impressed by much anymore. He looked up at them, his gaze sweeping over the group. His eyes lingered on Hallie's mismatched footwear, then dropped to the Cubs, who were trying to make themselves look as small and non-threatening as possible, which, given that they were already small, made them look absolutely tiny. "Lieutenant," Foster said, his voice carrying that command authority that made junior officers stand straighter. "I understand we've had an interesting afternoon in the daycare." "Yes, sir. Very interesting, sir." "And these," he gestured to the cubs, "are the individuals responsible for recovering classified materials, medical samples, and my favorite handkerchief?" "Yes, sir. May I present—" Hallie gestured to each cub in turn. "Sif, Boda, Wim, and Oss. They're the ones who found your items." Foster stood and walked around his desk. He was an imposing figure, well over 6 feet tall, and the cubs shrank back slightly as he approached. Then he did something unexpected. He crouched down. Not just a slight crouch, but a full knees-on-the-floor movement that brought him eye level with the cubs. His expression softened. "Thank you," he said simply. "You found things that have been missing for weeks. Things that are very important to the station. That makes you heroes today." Sif's ears perked up. "Heroes?" "Absolutely. Do you know what heroes do? They help people. They find solutions to problems. They do the right thing even when it's hard." Foster looked at each cub individually. Returning those items was the right thing to do. That took courage. "We were scared," Boda admitted quietly. "That's what makes it courage," Foster said. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing anyway." He reached out slowly, letting each cub sniff his hand before he patted their heads. "You should be proud of yourselves." 4 tails started wagging simultaneously. Foster stood and returned to his desk, his command persona sliding back into place like a well-worn coat. "Commander Sable, I want a full report on how those items ended up in the ventilation system. We need to review our containment protocols?" "Already on it, sir. Engineering is conducting a full audit of all pressure relief systems." "Good. Lieutenant Hallie, I'm adding a commendation to your file for handling this situation with, and I quote from Commander Sable's preliminary report, exceptional tactical thinking and interspecies cooperation." "Thank you, sir. But the cubs did all the real work." "Which is why—" Foster opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out 4 small objects. "I have something for you 4. The cubs edged closer, curiosity overcoming nervousness. Foster held up what appeared to be small badges, each one engraved with the station's insignia. "These are junior auxiliary badges. They're honorary positions. It means you're officially recognized as helpers of Sentinel Watch. When you're older, if you want to apply for real positions here, these will look very good on your applications." He pinned a badge carefully to each cub's chest fur. They stared down at them with awe, like they'd just been given the greatest treasure in the galaxy, which, from their perspective, they probably had. "Now," Foster continued, "I understand there was some confusion about appropriate behavior regarding personal property." His eyes twinkled slightly. "We took the human's boots," Sif said, his voice small. "We didn't ask. That was wrong." "And what did you learn?" "That stealing is bad," Wim added, "even if things are interesting." "And that it's better to tell adults when we find things," Oss said thoughtfully, "instead of hiding them." "We're sorry," Boda finished. "We won't do it again." Foster nodded approvingly. "Good. Those are important lessons. Dismissed." The cubs looked uncertain. Hallie gestured toward the door, and they scampered out, their badges glinting in the corridor lights. Hollis followed them, promising snacks and rest time. That left Hallie, Sable, and Foster. The Admiral's expression turned wry. "One boot, Lieutenant?" "The other one is in approximately 15 pieces, sir." The cubs were very thorough in their disassembly. Foster actually smiled. "I heard about your, quote, emotional, tactical approach to retrieving them, making children feel guilty. That's cold, Lieutenant. Effective, though, sir. Indeed. He sobered slightly. Seriously, though, good work today. The situation could have gone very differently. Those cubs could have damaged something critical, or exposed themselves to actual hazards. Instead, you turned it into a learning experience and recovered important materials. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need on this station. Just doing my job, sir, even if it's not technically my job. About that, Foster leaned back in his chair. How would you feel about making the daycare liaison position more official? Not full-time, but regular rotation. Hollis specifically requested you, and after today, I can see why. Hallie considered this. Part of her wanted to say no, to stick to pure military duties, but another part remembered 4 small faces looking up at her with trust, with eagerness to learn, with that universal desire to be praised and understood. I'll do it, sir, on one condition, which is, those cubs get to visit the security training center once a month. Supervised, age-appropriate activities. They've got good instincts. They should learn to use them properly. Sable looked surprised. You want to train them? I want to give them an outlet. Right now, their hunting instincts are making them steal things and hoard them. Give them proper challenges, proper structure, and they'll channel that energy into something productive. Hallie shrugged. Besides, in a few years, they'll be old enough for youth programs. Might as well start building good habits now. Foster and Sable exchanged glances. Some silent command-level communication happened. Approved, Foster said. Coordinate with Commander Sable on scheduling. Now get out of my office and go fix your boot. You look ridiculous. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Hallie left the office and found the cubs waiting in the corridor with Hollis. The moment they saw her, they rushed over, their new badges bouncing with each step. We got awards, Wim shouted. Look, look. I see them. Very impressive. You're official station helpers now. Does that mean we can come back? Sif asked hopefully. To the daycare? Well, you're kind of assigned there, so yes. No, to see you. Can we come back to see you? Something warm settled in Hallie's chest. Yeah, she said softly. Yeah, you can come see me. In fact, once a month you're going to come learn some real hunting skills. Proper ones. I'll teach you. 4 sets of eyes went wide. You'll teach us to hunt like humans hunt? Oz asked, fascinated. Like humans hunt, Hallie confirmed. We'll start with tracking, observation, patience, all the good stuff. The cubs erupted into excited chirps and chatter, dancing around her feet. Hollis was grinning. You're really committing to this, aren't you? Apparently. Hallie looked down at the cubs. All right, junior hunters, I need to go fix my boot now. That's your homework, by the way. Think about how you'd put something back together after taking it apart. We'll discuss it next time. Yes, Lieutenant, they chorused, attempting salutes that were adorable disasters. Back in the daycare, Hallie settled into the reading corner with her pile of boot components. Hollis had grabbed a repair kit, and the cubs gathered around, fascinated by the process. See, Hallie said, holding up the sole and upper, everything has to fit together in a specific way. It's like a puzzle. A puzzle, Oz repeated, watching intently. Hallie started the reassembly, explaining each step. The cubs proved to be surprisingly helpful assistants. Oz held pieces steady while she worked. Boda carefully threaded laces through eyelets, his claws surprisingly dexterous. Wim handed her tools from the kit, though he occasionally got distracted, and tried to play with them first. Sif supervised everything with intense focus, occasionally suggesting where pieces should go. As she worked, Hallie told them a real story this time. Not about the boots being from a dead mentor, but about when she was young and took apart her father's antique watch because she wanted to understand how time worked. "I got in trouble," she admitted. "But then my dad sat down with me, and we put it back together. Took us 3 hours. And you know what he said when we finished?" "What?" 4 voices asked in unison. He said, "Breaking things down to understand them isn't wrong, but you have to be willing to put them back together. That's the difference between learning and destroying." The cubs were silent, processing this. "So, you're not mad?" Boda asked. "About the boots?" "I was never really mad," Hallie said. "A little annoyed, maybe, but mostly I was impressed. You 4 worked together, planned together, executed a theft that I didn't even notice until it was done. That's good teamwork. You just need to use those skills for better purposes." She fitted the final piece of the boot into place and tested it. The boot was definitely not factory standard anymore. There was a slight wobble in the heel, and the laces were threaded in a way that would make any drill sergeant weep. But it was functional. She stood and took a few experimental steps. Squeak thump, squeak thump, squeak thump. The cubs burst into giggles. "It sounds funny," Wim chirped. "It sounds unique," Hallie corrected. "And you know what? These boots have a new story now. The day they got stolen by the fiercest hunters on Sentinel Watch and brought back piece by piece. That's a story worth keeping." Sif stood and approached her, his small face serious. Then he did something that made Hollis gasp softly. He exposed the back of his neck, a felrathi gesture of complete trust and submission, usually reserved for pack leaders. One by one, the other cubs did the same. "Your pack now," Sif said simply. "Our human pack leader." Hallie felt something catch in her throat. She reached down and gently touched each bowed head. "And you're my pack. My strange, boot-stealing, troublemaking pack." As she left the daycare at the end of her shift, the cubs lined up by the door. Their tails swished in perfect synchronization, a felrathi sign of respect usually reserved for warriors and leaders. Hallie saluted them back, which sent them into delighted chattering. Walking through the corridors back to her quarters, her slightly wonky boot making its distinctive squeak-thump rhythm, Hallie reflected on the day. Behind her, she could hear small footsteps trying to mimic her walk, followed by giggling. She didn't turn around, she just smiled. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy was built on being survivors, warriors, the species that came from a death world and refused to quit. But maybe, Hallie thought, their real strength was something simpler, the ability to laugh at themselves, to forgive quickly, to see potential in chaos and turn problems into teaching moments, to look at 4 small predators who'd stolen her boots and disassembled them, and instead of anger, feel pride, to turn thieves into students and students into pack. Her boots squeaked. Somewhere behind her, 4 small voices tried to recreate the sound and dissolved into laughter. Yeah, she thought, humanity was going to be just fine.